What's good, YouTube? Welcome back. Thank you for clicking onto this reaction. I hope you're looking forward to it just as much as I am. If you haven't already, head over to the content creators page. That link is in the description box down below. If you haven't already and you're enjoying our content, you know what you need to do. You need to like, comment, subscribe, hit that notification bell, but we're going to jump straight into this one.
Transformation, known as the Carolingian Renaissance. Charlemagne, or Charles the Great as he was known, united Europe under the leadership of one king. Proclaimed king of Francia in 770.
Right, let's start this from the beginning. Let's actually go.
Emperor Charlemagne was the father of the great European transformation, known as the Carolingian Renaissance. Charlemagne, or Charles the Great as he was known, united Europe under the leadership of
Charles the Great, really trying to compare himself to Alexander the Great, isn't he?
One king. Proclaimed king of Francia in 771, his influence spread with conquest, extending his rule throughout Europe. Then, with the Pope's blessing, the Holy Roman Empire was born, with Charlemagne as its rightful leader. Under his influence, there was a transformation of society, as Charlemagne revised government, military, religious, and social practices.
What changes did he do?
Fiscal policy.
What actual implements did he make, though, within those
This
regions?
video is brought to you by our friends over at CuriosityStream. The Carolingian Renaissance was a time of significant change, as the vision of Charlemagne transformed Western culture. It is recorded in history as the first of the three significant medieval transformations responsible for advancing the arts, culture, and human endeavor.
Okay, in what ways? Is it gonna cover it? Because I'd hope so.
It universally metamorphosized literature, artistic excellence,
In what ways?
architectural, legal, and religious studies.
But Charlemagne, yeah, of course.
Social and moral code throughout the Holy Roman Empire. Changing ideas and ideals were enthusiastically adopted amongst those who were part of the religious or social
that's very
elite.
interesting as well.
At the same time, the new morality was visited.
So the changes that he made on were taken on very well by the public and the people, which again is interesting. Sometimes it would take a long time for these things to be adapted.
On those of lesser status increasingly throughout the empire. Those in positions of power in the courts of the Carolingian domicile of Francia and those religious superiors applied their efforts and energy to educational and cultural advances. They developed writing skills and promoted a shared Latin language. They set about preserving religious and classical texts, copying them and encouraging everyday communication.
So it was a bit like what I said with the Saladin video, where he's made efforts towards the education and cultural advances, which was the same as Saladin. So it was the same sort of premise where I sort of said, I respect anyone that is trying to better educate their people, because better educated people bring you better armed military and also just better economic prospects for your country in general. Invested in preserving ancient texts. Again, that's a thing anyone who wants to learn history is happy about. And then developing writing skills and also promoting Latin was very interesting. But of course, again, it's to do with Christianity and it originated in Latin. So I'd imagine that would be the main reason why they sort of promoted that.
Literature and the arts were essential, but at the core of their efforts was a desire to create a higher moral code, a moral regeneration based on a new rationale.
The idea that chivalry and so on and so forth. I'd imagine chivalry was probably before that, but just a moral high ground. I understand that to set a precedent over the rest of Europe as well, for people to follow in.
Charlemagne eagerly promoted learning throughout his empire. He celebrated the extraordinary power of education and its potential to shape civilization. He
Okay.
exalted literature, architecture, and art. Above all, his cultural and educational renaissance defined his rule, and not his bloody triumphs. His victories were more than military conquests. They were opportunities to spread a new culture of instruction and inquiry radiating from his Frankian center.
It's so good. Like I said, I'm glad that we're now getting more breakdowns in what sort of educational reforms that he made. That's very good and very interesting. I'm glad about that. Like I said, I think it's so important to sort of promote that, and try and make your people be able to communicate between themselves and just get the best life that they could, because then obviously happy people, better economy, better lives, more likely to keep you in power. It's all good. Prosperous land is just a better land in general.
As the empire expanded, Charlemagne absorbed learning from many cultures.
Again, very smart. I like the fact that he's able to sort of take on other ideas. That sort of shows it there.
His military success gave him access to the finery of Anglo-Saxon metalwork and art, to the luxury of Moorish architecture. As king of the Lombards, he embraced their cultural attributes. The emperor refined and administered cultural change, taking the best from what he found around him.
Again, that adaptation, how important that is and how good that is. I really like it.
Charlemagne promoted scriptoria and translation and documentation of religious scripts into Latin in monasteries. Many of the earliest texts that remain today are those of the Carolingians. The modern library of Latin works can be dated back directly to the emperor and his advisors.
Oh, so what were they copies? So basically translated stuff, yeah? I see. Very impressive.
Charlemagne
Yeah, it does seem like his Renaissance was extremely important for the Western Europe.
eagerly gathered many of the finest minds in the kingdom. He counted amongst his...
Again, so good, and is so grateful that he was able to sort of bring these people together to sort of get all these ideas in one spot, write them down.
His intellectual mentors, theological advisor Alcuin of York, and later Theodulf of Orleans, the historian and poet of Lombardy, Paul the Deacon, grammarian and poet Peter of Pisa, the scholar and theologian Paulinus of Aquileia, the Frankish poet Angilbert, Germanic bishop and scholar Angil Ram, Frankish statesman, close advisor and eminent writer Einhard.
So there's a lot of people he's getting here, and again, like some people from different places, different sort of thought processes. It's very, very interesting, and I really enjoy these sort of videos where it's not so much focused on battles, but sort of the cultural implications that people had. It's very interesting. It's very enjoyable to watch.
And Bishop Waldo of Reichenau. Charlemagne was not aloof in his attitude to learning. His insistence on learning applied to himself and his family, as well as all those attending his court. Going against convention for a leader, Charlemagne studied arithmetic, grammar, and his favorite, astronomy. Even in old age, he was learning.
Once again, I think it shows that if you're willing to learn things, it puts a precedent for the people to follow in your footsteps, which is very, very honourable to sort of do.
To write, even though he never quite mastered it, and we will never know whether he was ever able to read. The Carolingian Renaissance under the leadership of Charlemagne also radicalized the economy. Stemming from the work of Charlemagne's father, Pepin the Short, and in collaboration with King Offa of Mercia, Charlemagne understood the need for reform. He saw that ruling a kingdom with a
Said at the start, are we going to get breakdowns of these? I'm really enjoying the fact this is going to get broken down.
Multitude of different currencies was chaotic and far too demanding. Charlemagne realized that the old gold standard would no longer serve his needs. After all, to secure peace, he had been forced to hand over Venice and Sicily to the Byzantines and had lost significant trade routes to Africa. He set about abolishing the fiscal system based on the gold sou. He replaced it with the new livre, a Carolingian measure for both money and weight, and with the denier. There were 20 sous in 1 livre and 240 in a denier, a counting system that survived well into the modern period. Charlemagne formalized his new monetary system in several edicts and new conventions. In the Capitulary of Wheelis in 802, he overhauled accounting and set firm rules for payments and expenses.
So, what you mean he overhauled it in general? Set firm rules about payments and expenses. So he just basically made it super strict. Is that what it means by overhauled it?
814, the emperor banned lending money for interest, alongside.
Okay, something that we completely do today, but he outlawed it then. That's interesting. That's an interesting take.
In 814, he introduced the Capitulary of the Jews, which denied Jews their traditional role as official moneylenders.
So was banned money lending a attack on Jews? Was it so that they could basically sort of stop them? I think that might be the reason why, because then obviously they've done the rule after. So was both of those things directly sort of aimed for that demographic?
The act was not hostile to Jews, who were respected in the empire. Instead, it supported the religious beliefs of most of its citizens.
Okay,
he also set up systems to control prices and taxes on goods and supplies.
Again, price control on taxes and goods and supplies. Very interesting, very good.
Carolingian Renaissance balanced the influence of the courts and subjugation of authority to the church. So too in his reforms, Charlemagne showed equal conviction to secular and religious protocol.
Okay.
His wish in
so is he trying to separate courts and church, or is he trying to integrate them?
Of authority to the church. So it's the influence of the courts and subjugation of authority to the church.
Right.
So too in his reforms, Charlemagne showed equal conviction to secular and religious protocol. His wish in uniting church and state was for nothing less than to strengthen the purity and decency of all citizens. Charlemagne toughened the power base of the church, insisting on the morality of the clergy, their practices, and the exercise of faith. He sanctioned an ambitious program of church reform, specifying the accepted doctrines, controlling ownership of property, and defining acceptable behaviors. The emperor sought to dispel paganism and apply faith.
Okay, so this is how he's trying to strengthen the church up. It's an interesting take.
Led extensive and severe moral and ethical reform, which for the most part was supported by the clergy.
Oh, but he got support at the end of the day.
Charlemagne transformed the political and administrative climate throughout his realm. The change was accelerated and enhanced after he was crowned emperor. He required a system to support his elevated status. Based in Aachen, he replaced Merovingian fractured processes with pioneering central government, responsible practices, and structured, effective bureaucracy.
Nice, Charlemagne.
As ruler of the most extraordinary Western realm since the Romans, Charlemagne ultimately exercised absolute sovereign rule. He built a system throughout his kingdom that supported and endorsed his authority over political and judicial matters. He inspired with appeals to loyalty and the provision of efficient systems and protocol. He commanded...
He is seeming like a very competent leader. Very interesting fella. Very, very interesting fella.
Priests and citizens. Emperor Charlemagne adopted Barnum, investing ultimate political and legislative authority to himself. Church and nobility were organized around him. This depended on the efficiency,
making him completely central to the governance, and all the power be around him. So even though he's like delegating power to other people, he's still the central figure to everything.
Loyalty and support of those he ruled over. In the critical areas of governance, the emperor endorsed the Messatica system, in which his envoys could supervise administration in areas too remote for him to visit. They were the eyes, ears, and tongue of the emperor. He also implemented the itinerant household that allowed him to move his government with him into key areas when needed, instead of relying on a capital city.
That's an interesting adaptation compared to other leaders. So he was always on the move wherever he might be needed to govern or implement these rules in. He was able to do that. That's a really interesting fact.
Charlemagne overhauled local administration with the introduction of the scabini, professional experts on the law that were obliged to know every national law so that all men could be judged according to it.
Okay.
Every count had the assistance of 7 scabini. Judges were to use sworn inquests to establish facts and were banned from taking bribes. To make administration more efficient, Charlemagne subdivided parts of his kingdom into Austrasia, Neustria, and Burgundy.
Okay.
These were the inner core of his...
Nice, and Burgundy stayed for a long time. It's quite a powerful place within the French kingdom as well later on, right?
realm under direct supervision of the Messatica system and the itinerant household. Beyond these areas was the Frankish Regna, governed by Prince Pepin in Italy and Prince Louis in Aquitaine, where administrative duties were delegated to the counts. Further out were the Marcher areas, the frontier territories of Brittany, Spain, and Bavaria.
Once again, just he had a lot of area to sort of conquer. Well, he conquered and he took over, and he was able to sort of handle it, and sort of there wasn't too much of like civil unrest within the country, which is really impressive. And also there wasn't anyone sort of coming up against him within inside, like no sort of backstabbing or anything like that.
Administered by powerful, often autonomous governors. Further still were areas that were dependencies and tributaries at one time or another, not under control of the central government. On top of this administrative division was the uniform judicial system that we talked about earlier, aimed at creating national consistency. Central to this harmonized system were the Messatica and Scabini, and the system was strengthened by 802 AD with the amended Salic law.
So what is that law?
Finally, to centralize power, Charlemagne...
What were those two big things that he done then? So what do they stand for?
With the amended Salic law.
What was the Salic law?
Finally, to centralize power, Charlemagne called the Placitum Generalis on average 3 times a year, while Marchfield was held between the months of March and May, and dealt primarily with military matters.
Nice.
All men of stature within the empire were obliged to attend. Those...
Okay, these some of those things. So called... Okay. I'm with you.
Present declared their support for the emperor and the empire. In these meetings, Charlemagne's views were made known and taken back across the realm. Military operations and problems within the empire were discussed. Legislative and judicial law was created, and the officials of the empire transcribed the proceedings in the text into chapters or capitulaires.
Okay, he actually, okay. I like what he's done here. Just being able to have your orders sort of go around easy. Just the military changes.
These were then marked with the signature and seal of Charlemagne. It was during these meetings that the early foundations were laid for many aspects of the modern Western way of life. In summary, Charlemagne is known for his
the Salic law was Germanic law descendant from barbarians, or how Romans would have called them. So what was it leniency towards them, or was it just more restrictions onto them?
Western way of life. In summary, Charlemagne is known for his many reforms, including the economy, education, and government administration.
Yeah, I wonder how many other countries adapted and took on these things that he had set the foundations for.
His rule ushered in the Carolingian Renaissance, a period of spirited cultural and intellectual activity within the Western Church. He focused intently on scholarship and the promotion of liberal arts at the court, making sure that his children and grandchildren were well educated and had studied himself.
Very smart, and that's what
Charlemagne established a new monetary standard as well as a universal accounting system. He expanded church reform and strengthened its power structure, improving the skill and moral quality of the clergy, standardizing liturgical practices, improving on the basic tenets of the faith and morale, and rooting out paganism. Charlemagne's improvements on governance have been lauded by historians for instigating increased central control, efficient bureaucracy, accountability, and cultural renaissance. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, subscribe as a sacrifice to the algorithm. A big shout out to our patrons.
Once again, a great video by HistoryMarche. What's some of these footnotes? First one, Charlemagne left his empire to his son Louis. Charlemagne loved church music, particularly